You are listening to Uranium Spotlight, your weekly podcast on the forces shaping the global uranium fuel market, sponsored by Purepoint Uranium Group. Uranium Spotlight isn't just a podcast, it's a platform. Visit purepoint.ca to access in-depth market briefings, sector analysis, and the inaugural Behind the Curve report, understanding when and how the uranium market turns. If uranium matters to you, you're in the right place. And now, your host, Chris Frostad.
It's August 11th, 2026, and this week on Uranium Spotlight, the summer spot market that keeps finding buyers on every dip. India confronts the true scale of its uranium appetite, Niger holds new customers in Europe, New Mexico turns against its own miners, and IsoEnergy places a bold bet on American uranium. The summer doldrums are still with us, but last week showed there's a bid under this market every time it softens. The spot price opened this week at $86.45 a pound U3O8, dipped as low as $85.60 on Monday as sellers cut offers to close the gap with buyers, and then recovered steadily, closing Friday at $86.40 a pound U3O8. In total, 6 spot transactions covering 650,000 pounds changed hands, nearly all of it for prompt delivery. The pattern matters more than the headline numbers. Monday's weakness produced exactly one deal at $85.75 a pound, and that dip proved to be the low point of the week. Bids returned on Tuesday, a 100,000-pound trade printed at $86.25 on Thursday, and buying interest firmed further into Friday. After Friday's close, 3 more transactions were confirmed, including one at $87.01 a pound for November delivery, a premium suggesting that demand further out the calendar is willing to pay. The term market tells a similar story of quiet accumulation. The long-term price held at $94 a pound U3O8, and while no new contract awards were reported, the queue of utility demand keeps lengthening. A U.S. utility formally requested up to 400,000 pounds a year for delivery from 2030 to 2034, with an option on another 300,000 pounds annually through 2037. Another utility is evaluating offers on roughly 500,000 pounds a year beginning in 2027, and 3 more are gathering information ahead of formal tenders. For investors, the signal is in the structure rather than the price. A market that absorbs every dip within days, while utilities quietly line up for delivery stretching into the late 2030s, is a market where patience increasingly sits on the side of the seller. India's Committee on Public Undertakings, the parliamentary panel reviewing the country's nuclear build-out, has delivered a finding that deserves more attention than it received. India intends to reach 100 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by 2047, the centennial of its independence, and the committee concluded that the country must massively increase both domestic uranium production and imports to have any chance of getting there. The arithmetic is stark. 1 gigawatt is roughly equivalent to 1 large reactor, and a reactor of that size typically consumes about 500,000 pounds of uranium each year, though the real totals vary widely by design. The committee projects that just the first 25 gigawatts of new capacity will require at least 11.9 million pounds of U3O8 annually, and that is on top of what the existing fleet already consumes. India currently produces about 1.1 million pounds a year, which is not enough to cover today's needs, let alone tomorrow's. The remaining 75 gigawatts is planned as some mix of large conventional reactors and smaller advanced designs whose real-world fuel consumption remains largely unproven. India is not standing still. It already has 13.1 gigawatts across 17 reactors under construction, and it meets current demand with imports from Russia, Kazakhstan, Canada, and Uzbekistan. In recent weeks, it has signed new supply agreements with Australia and Canada, with another in progress with Uzbekistan. But scale the ambition to the full 100 gigawatts, and annual requirements approach 40 million pounds, and where that much uranium would come from is anyone's guess. The takeaway is that India represents demand most supply models have not fully priced in. Every new agreement Delhi signs pulls pounds out of the market that Western utilities are counting on, and that competition for supply is only beginning. The 2023 coup in Niger delivered one of the uranium market's biggest shocks in years. The junta that seized government went on to take control of the mines of French state-owned miner Orano, including the Samara operation outside Arlet, in which Orano held a 63.4% stake. With the border with Benin closed, cutting off the country's nearest route to the sea, exports stopped and millions of pounds of uranium piled up at site. Those stockpiles were far larger than what would normally sit at a mine site, precisely because the export ban left the material with nowhere to go. A deal between the junta, the French government, and Orano eventually returned an amount of uranium matching Orano's ownership share, but roughly 2 million pounds that were moved to the airport at Nemi late last year remain in play. That movement triggered a series of investigations that ultimately produced a settlement between France's material in February, and now Romania says it will purchase 661,000 pounds from the same lot. The purchase may be the first sign that Niger is looking to rebuild commercial ties with European buyers, though pointedly not with France, the former colonial power with which the junta had made particular point of burning its bridges. If more of these pounds find their way into EU fuel cycles, it would be a modest positive for European supply security at a time when Western utilities are working to reduce their dependence on Eastern suppliers. For investors, Niger remains the case study in why jurisdiction matters. Material that sat locked behind a closed border for the better part of 2 years is only now trickling back into the market on terms set by a military government. Utilities remember these episodes when they negotiate long-term contracts, and they're increasingly willing to pay a premium for pounds from politically stable ground. Back in the United States, New Mexico's Department of Justice has ordered work stopped at the Crown Point and Church Rock in situ recovery projects held by Laramide Resources, the only company currently licensed to produce uranium in the state. The department pointed to the region's long history of environmental damage, existing tailing ponds, and the risk of water contamination. Separately, the state has drafted a proposal to ban uranium mining in the Chama Basin watershed after Canadian company Gamma Resources purchased land there and began drilling. The context makes this more than a local permitting story. New Mexico was once a major source of uranium for the United States, and both sides of this debate concede it could be again. Yet the country produced only 1 million pounds of uranium last year, while consuming close to 50 million pounds of U-3O8 annually, a gap of roughly 49 to 1 between what American reactors burn and what American mines deliver. Its utilities, meanwhile, have not yet signed enough new import agreements this year to cover the difference. A wave of contracting is coming to this market, and every domestic project pushed to the sidelines will make that wave harder to absorb. The message for investors is that American supply faces political headwinds even in historic producing regions, which raises the value of every domestic project that already holds its permits. That gap between the United States' needs and what it can build is exactly where this week's final story begins. That tension, a country that needs domestic pounds but struggles to permit new mines, is precisely the opening IsoEnergy is playing. On August 4th, the company announced a definitive agreement with DISA Technologies to create DISA Uranium Corporation, a new U.S. platform combining IsoEnergy's permitted past-producing Utah mines, including Tony M., Daneros, and RIM, with DISA's patented high-pressure slurry ablation processing technology and its remediation business. IsoEnergy contributes the Utah portfolio for roughly 33% of the new company, making it the largest shareholder, and will invest $33 million U.S. in a concurrent $105 million financing backed by Tembo Capital, BHP Ventures, Valor Equity Partners, Halliburton Labs, and others, giving DISA Uranium an implied value of approximately $505 million U.S. What differentiates the platform is feedstock that requires no new mining. DISA holds the only U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission license authorizing uranium recovery from abandoned mine waste across multiple sites, a legacy of more than 15,000 abandoned sites across the American West. Test work at Tony M showed the ablation technology can cut material volumes by 78%, while recovering roughly 88% of the uranium. And over time, that combined resource base could support the first new conventional uranium mill built in the United States in more than 40 years. For investors, the deal lets IsoEnergy unlock value from its U.S. assets while keeping its high-grade hurricane deposit in the Athabasca Basin untouched, and it hands shareholders meaningful exposure to the rebuild of the American fuel supply chain. Watch for the transaction to close this month and for progress at Tony M as the first real test of whether the model delivers.
You've been listening to Uranium Spotlight, your weekly podcast dedicated to the latest developments shaping the uranium fuel market and its role in the global energy landscape, sponsored by Purepoint Uranium Group. While our passion for the sector is undeniable, nothing discussed here should be considered investment advice. Our mission is to provide a clear, balanced view of the forces influencing uranium prices and the nuclear fuel cycle. For deeper analysis and market briefings, Visit purepoint.ca. Join us again next Tuesday for another edition of Uranium Spotlight.